Alright, what's up guys from the Prot Warrior Discord? My name's Griff, obviously. I think you guys have probably seen me around. If you haven't, this is just an 11 Sanguine depths that I decided to randomly pug, try and get some footage out there, and show you guys what I'm seeing on my end. Because I know a lot of you guys are having some issues running keys at any level, thinking it's maybe an issue with their survivability, or maybe it's an issue with your group. It's really hard to tell, but just going to analyze this gameplay and try and see if I can help you guys out. It's both for my benefit and yours. So, here we go with the start of the key. They just started it. We're going to go ahead and just pull a single pack at a time. It's a pug. I don't really know what to expect from this group yet. And on top of that, it's necrotic, so even though the mobs don't hurt that much because it's only a tyrannical week, I really want to be monitoring those necrotic stacks. Now, one of the things that you're probably noticing is I'm trying to rotate my cooldowns as much as possible to give the healer some breathing room. Not really taking too much damage, and it's kind of important, especially in a dungeon like Sanguine Depths, to be doing that, where there is a lot of damage that's going to be going out to the group, whether that is from bosses or mobs, because a lot of these mobs do have AoE mechanics. Getting to about 19 stacks, I'm at half health. It's probably a good idea to get out of there and start kiting, let those stacks drop, and then once they drop, go ahead and move on to the next pack after that initial pack dies. Just trying to keep up shield block here, dumping into ignore pain, revenging when I feel like I can. One thing that I know a lot of people probably struggle with is their use of either ignore pain or revenge. It can be really easy to get greedy with both of them. But in general, if you have shield block that's going to be coming up off cooldown, you probably want to pool a little bit of rage, so that way you can shield block coming off of that. Or if you know you won't have shield block, you want to pull rage so that you can ignore pain to try and give the healer some more breathing room. Again, I'm just coming back in after leaping out and getting rid of those necrotic stacks. It's vital that you pay attention to these necrotic stacks, because right now, this dungeon this week, and actually any dungeon this week, as a prot where you are completely reliant on your healer. You don't really heal yourself. Your job is to make the healer's job easy to heal you. So if you have really high stacks of necrotic, you're probably going to die. And that's a really big concern in this dungeon specifically towards the end of the Gauntlet, because there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of mobs that are going to be hitting you all the time, and there's not a whole lot of places to kite, and on top of that, you're having to deal with the last boss, which is really hard to kite because you can't slow her. Just again, another kind of nice easy pack here. Just 3. Pulling them. I'm getting to about 12 stacks. I don't really need to kite, so I'm kind of debating that in my head. I probably should have just stayed out because I almost dropped the stacks. But it's a learning experience for both you and I. I really like to pull this tick right here, because if you don't, it's really easy to miss percent in the end and have to double back to grab another one. Like just literally less than a percent in order to actually complete the key. Prideful this week, especially since it's tyrannical, is really difficult to deal with, because in this dungeon it's really linear, so it's just kind of you get prideful when you get prideful. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. I'm sure there's ways that you can get around it, but in a pug, it's really hard to coordinate those kind of things. I leaped out there. I'm not entirely sure why I did. Alright, we're getting prideful here. We still have 2 mobs up, which kind of sucks because I'm still rolling with about 20 stacks necrotic going into prideful. From what I've been doing in keys, it doesn't seem like the prideful mob actually gives you stacks necrotic. So rolling into this with stacks necrotic isn't a huge deal, but it's definitely can be stressful on your healer. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I probably could have done better on that by just getting out and dropping the stacks, but it is what it is. again, biggest problem here is going to be watching those necrotic stacks. I was not in there for very long, and you already see it's up to 22 stacks down there on my health bar. So I'm just getting out and letting those drop, going back in. I don't really have much up, just my shield block. So this is kind of one of those things where you have to be careful, especially on a fortified week. It's not fortified, it is tyrannical, so the mobs don't hit as hard, but that is kind of a danger zone to be in. Is being in a pack that big with no defensives, no shield block, no shield wall, nothing. So that's another thing you want to keep in mind on. So boss is pretty easy. Just do the mechanics, man. I mean, that's really all it comes down to. It's not your job this week to really be the difference in whether you key it or if you don't in terms of the bosses. Your group either does the mechanics or they don't. And if they don't, it's probably going to be a dead key, unfortunately, but that's just the way Tyrannical rolls. Just try and keep your shield block up for the big hits. Fill the gaps with Ignore Pain. Dump Rage as much as possible into those two. I popped Last Stand here, and I probably shouldn't have, to be honest, because I'm wasting a lot of uptime on it. But it is what it is. Like I said, this is a learning experience for you and me. I'm just going back through this and kind of seeing where I can point out areas where I failed or areas where I did good that might be helpful to you. That's definitely something to be aware of, though. As especially on these bosses, having a good timer. If you can see, I have the not only am I running DBM, but I'm running the countdown there as well, the timeline, and that really helps me know what abilities are coming up and when I need to have things up, and when I can kind of skimp on my defensives. Whether that means I'm going to be a little greedy with revenge casts, or I'm just going to use IP instead of shield block. So going into the Overseer pack, the Overseer is definitely your main concern here. You want to make sure that you're probably kicking as much as possible on this, same with the group. My group is actually getting their kicks out fairly decently, which is nice to see. But especially in Fortified, this is a really nasty pack. You want to make sure that you're breaking those chains as soon as possible, because if you're not, you're causing a bunch of extra stress on the healer. And the group should be doing the same thing. Again, hitting 21 stacks, I'm getting out. Around 20, that's the cutoff point for me. I don't think you really want to stay in with Necrotic any longer than that. There are a few of these packs that do end up getting Inspiring this week. Or I believe there's just one. And it's right after this bridge. There's two ways you can go about this. You can either ask somebody in your group to CC the Inspired ad, or you just blow it up. In all honesty, because it's not fortified, you can probably get away with blowing it up, assuming your group doesn't have absolute potatoes for DPS. But you might have absolute potatoes, in which case it's probably a good idea to just go ahead and ask for a CC and get out. Here I decided to wait. We could pull the gargoyle. The thing is, the sentinel there, he's kind of an unpleasant mob to deal with, even in tyrannical. So I just figured it was better just to waste a little bit of time on the prideful, prideful buff, and just pump these ads because he doesn't take very long to go away. You really have to be careful here, though. With necrotic, it can get very hard to be able to get out of these areas in dungeons like this, where it's really compact without pulling things. So that's one thing that I didn't really mention yet, but if you're going to be kiting in order to drop your stacks of necrotic, you really need to be conscious of what's around you. I kind of halfway commit to dropping stacks there, and I don't know why I did. I could have just stayed in, because everything was basically dead. But moving into this hallway, I think this is where a lot of groups actually end up screwing up, because this hallway can actually be kind of deadly if people aren't paying attention. The ground thing, the pools of blood that get dropped by certain ads can be really nasty if people stand in it. And it can be really easy to grab extra stuff because the camera is so pushed in. So just keep your head on a swivel, try and pay attention. And if you have to, just do what I'm doing here. Get out, let those stacks drop. Most of these mobs are actually casters. So you can just go ahead and walk away and they're still going to cast at you. But it gives you opportunities to drop your stacks. There's usually only 1 or 2 melee boys in these packs, so it's really not too bad. So, just to give you guys context of what I did there, I leaped, and you're probably wondering why. I barely had any stacks. Well, the reason was this pack that just got pulled. I saw it kind of coming down the hallway, and I'm like, I need to get out of here. It would have been a good idea, and it would have worked if my group had followed me. It wasn't really that big of a deal at the end of the pull, but stuff like this, if you're not on it, if you don't have a good group, if you don't have gear or defensives to kind of cover this, that can be the kind of stuff that can wipe your group and potentially cause issues in the key. So just always be aware of what's coming down the hallway at you. You never want to be that tank that makes kind of bad positioning decisions that ends up being the reason why the key was a failure. It's not a pleasant experience. I've seen plenty of keys get depleted that way. Just always be looking down the hallway at the patrol and thinking, is that going to be a problem? Especially this week with necrotic. So we get the prideful buff. Again, kind of a really crappy timing, but it just saves us time on trash, I guess. And again, there are ways to get better prideful timings. But in all honesty, when you are pugging, the prideful timings aren't exactly as important because your main focus is going to be, is my group actually doing what they need to be doing, or am I doing everything that I possibly can to make up for the failures that the group is having? Prideful, well, it's going to give you a really nice damage buff. It's not going to really fix any of those problems. The damage means nothing if things aren't getting interrupted. Or if mechanics aren't being done. So we have 50 seconds on Lust. I just decided, screw it. We're just going to pull the boss. I could have waited. And said, you know what, we'll wait for Lust. But I had pretty good faith in this group. This group has been pumping so far, and they've been doing really good on mechanics. So it's kind of one of those things where you kind of have to read the group. But for the most part, I don't think it's ever really all that worth waiting for Lust. Unless there's absolutely no way that the group is killing something without it. So for Executor Tarvold, it's really simple. The best thing you can possibly do as a tank here is honestly just pull him back a little bit at the very beginning. You want to make sure that those orbs are fairly well desynced in the way that they travel, so that way it gives your group a lot of time to move to either side of the room before the next one comes through. I just popped shield wall there. One thing that I have not been doing a lot this dungeon is I run the wall. And I've barely been using shield wall. And I get really bad at that, just simply because I'm not taking that much damage, in all honesty. So that's one area that I could definitely improve. If you're running the wall, you really want to try and use shield wall as often as possible. So let's talk about Grand Proctor Berlia really quick. She does a really big amount of physical damage right off the bat here with her Iron Spikes. So I have shield block rolling for that, but I also pop my Scale Trinket for the big absorb. One thing that you could probably do here, because she does hit extremely hard on Tyrannical with those, is just you want to make sure that you're saving a shield block charge for that ability explicitly. And it might not be a bad idea, depending on the key level that you're in, to roll another defensive with that. And part of that really comes down to smart usage of your shield blocks. So if you see during that intermission there, I'm not using shield block because it's just a waste. You want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on that. Looking for gaps on bosses or mobs or whatnot where you don't have to cast it, and where it would actually be a detriment to using shield block. That's one way that you can really bump up your effective uses of shield block and not have uses of it where it's a waste. So you're not really wanting to look at your uptime of shield block, you're wanting to look at more or not. You're wanting to look at whether or not your cast of shield block was actually used properly. Prot Warrior is not necessarily a brain dead tank. You actually have to think about the encounters, and you have to know on when the good times to use your mitigation are and when you probably shouldn't. Especially right now with how much downtime we actually do have with shield block. So this hallway in particular causes a lot of issues for people. I'm going to go ahead and mark the inspired ad. I'm going to go ahead and ask for a hunter trap. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stay out in this hallway, and I'm going to pull them out into the hallway. It makes it a lot easier for people to actually be able to see because your whole camera isn't forced in. And it also gives you more room to kite for necrotic.
None have ever escaped the Sanguine depths, and neither will you.
This upcoming pull is where a lot of groups go wrong, especially in Fortified. So if you target this far left mob and you just use throw weapon or just a single target ability, you can actually pull the left too, and you don't get the gargoyle. It makes this pull a lot easier. There's less tank damage that's going to go out. The only problem is camera still sucks in this place. But since it's only 2 targets, they should melt a lot faster, which means your chances of actually wiping here are a lot less. So there, I ate a few frontals. Probably shouldn't have, but hindsight's 20/20. My healer bopped me. So one of the things you really want to have as a tank is a bop cancel macro. Because what happens is when you get bopped, and if you have paladins, you really want to be asking for bop this week because of necrotic. But once you get it on you, you're going to drop aggro, so it's going to go smack somebody else, whatever mob you're tanking. So as soon as you see the bop, you just hit that bop cancel macro and you're good to go. You'll have aggro back and all your stacks are cleared. Alright, so now starts the hard part of this dungeon. This is probably the spot where you're going to have issues this week in Sanguine Depths, besides the second boss. Second boss is going to test whether or not your group is going to be capable. This section is really going to test the patience of people. You really have to keep an eye on those necrotic stacks, and once they start getting up, you need to get out. If you don't have Kyrian Potion, you need to kite there, because you're going to just keep getting inundated with mobs, and if you don't, you're probably going to die. Big single target pumping into the boss here is really valuable, because it's going to phase her, which means you're going to have more room to kite, and a lot more room to get out if you need to. It also means fewer time, or more time in between when the Gorgons spawn and when they get to you, which means it's giving your healer more time to get mana and you more time to actually drop combat, so that way your stacks fall off immediately. As you probably picked up, our group, somebody forgot something, and that somebody was me. I didn't pick up the Naru heart. You want to make sure you do this. We still thankfully two-chested this dungeon, but our hunter went back, so I wasn't really willing to pull a whole lot because we didn't have all of our DPS here. So I was just kind of waiting for him to get back. But that's a real time waster, and sometimes the key timings here can be tight depending on your group. So you want to avoid simple mistakes like that. I went ahead and popped shield wall here. It's a little bit of a bigger pull. And as you can see, necrotic stacks are just piling up really quick. So instead of trying to just limp wrist my way through that pull, I just said I'm going to pop cooldowns here so I can stay in longer. And also not give my healer as much to worry about while staying in. Unfortunately, we don't have a Venthyr in the party, so we can't really take advantage of those pylons. But if you do have a Venthyr in your party, one thing you can do that really helps you a lot in this dungeon is at the very start, before you even do the key, go out into the hallway and pull everything in that hallway in a Mythic 0, and you can go ahead and have your Venthyr pop the pylon that's right next to the door. And you'll get up to 10 stacks if you pull the entire hallway. And as soon as you get those 10 stacks, you put the key in, you start the key with 40 seconds of 50% increased damage. It's really great, it'll save you a lot of time, and then you can go ahead and pull the first pack in the dungeon to the pylon again. And when you kill them, it'll refresh it, so you'll have it almost the entirety of that wing with 50% increased damage. So again, I'm just watching my necrotic stacks here. It's really important in this hallway specifically. Had a little bit of a lag spike there, but went ahead and popped a healing pot. Just keep pumping the boss. You'll get through this. Just be smart about it. Pay attention. If you need to take your time, take your time. This can be really tough on a healer's mana, this specific gauntlet. So that's another thing that you really need to watch out for. Went ahead and popped shield wall. I took the frontal cleave from the gargoyle. It does a lot of damage, and my necrotic stacks are stacking up, so it's probably about time I get out. So I'm just using soul shape to create some distance. Make sure I'm not getting hit. Pick up some more soul stones, or health stones, excuse me. Don't really need them, but it's always good to have the full amount. And that's the gauntlet done. I'm actually extremely surprised we had no wipes there. It's honestly probably the hardest part of the dungeon, in my opinion. So we're rolling in. We've got 96.4%. This hallway will give us 100%, and we'll have prideful for the boss. So one of those hallways where, yeah, it's a lot of mobs, and you're going to get a lot of necrotic stacks pretty quick. But if you're rolling things like you should be, like shield block and IP, you really shouldn't have too much issue. So just go ahead and stay in, unless, of course, it actually starts becoming an issue. So Hunter doesn't really want to have it, so I just go ahead and take it. It's not that big of a deal. One way that you could really make that easier on yourself is just to have an extra keybind assigned to your extra action bar. I don't really bother here. It doesn't really seem to be an issue for me. But if you are doing Mythic Shriekwing, for example, and you're the Lantern player, it's probably a good idea. Let's talk about that mechanic that she did really quick. What I typically like to do is I'll just take her to whatever the second in the order of AoE that she's going to be doing. And as soon as that first one goes off, I'm just going to go ahead and swap over to the first one. It's very similar to Vexiona. If you do that, if you're paying attention, it shouldn't really be an issue. Our DPS is doing a great job of actually spreading out, making sure people aren't getting cleaved too much. I eat this one, I think, at the end there. I might have gotten out of it. It's hard to tell. But don't be indecisive when you want to move. Just pick one and go for it. But overall, it was a really good run. I mean, granted, I got some really good pugs, but at the same token, if you're doing what you need to do, it's out of your hands, and you can really also help contribute to a good run. I hope this really helped. I'm looking forward to doing some more of these, so see you on the other side.